Hello and welcome back to another episode of Diablo to D&D. My name is David, and today I'm going to be talking about a concept that I am calling mechanical and philosophical cohesion. So normally this week I would do a let's create or a let's fix, but as I was going over ideas of what I wanted to change or add, I realized that the barbarian didn't have something that kind of made it feel like a barbarian. And this got me thinking about how D&D was designed and how I was making this adaptation and what I wanted to change to make them more cohesive. So I created two ideas that I'm calling mechanical cohesion and philosophical cohesion. Mechanical cohesion is a fairly simple concept. It's how do the abilities interact? Do they create a positive, neutral, or negative interaction, or do they not interact at all? Positive cohesion is an interaction that mitigates or removes a downside or expands on an upside. Something like this would be rage and reckless attack. The defensive downside of reckless attack, advantage on attacks against you, is mitigated by rage's defensive bonus, and the offensive side is reinforced. This is kind of creating something that's greater than the sum of its parts, or just pulling out the problems, removing a problem that an ability has or that is detrimental to you. Another possibility is something like gaining proficiency in Constitution saving throws if you're a spellcaster, or picking up Warcaster so that you have advantage on concentration checks. This way, it shores up that downside of possibly losing a spell. Neutral cohesion is where there is both an upside and downside when the mechanics interact. I can't think of one in D&D proper. I'm sure there's one, I just can't think of any. But Matthew Mercer created a class called the Blood Hunter, and it has a subclass called Order of the Lycan that has the ability Hybrid Transformation. It turns you into essentially a were creature and gives you a lot of the same benefits and detriments that a were creature would have. While transformed, if you fall under half hit points, you have to save against attacking creatures at random. If you are raging or concentrating on a spell, you automatically fail the save, but Rage removes the form's weakness to silver, and spellcasting gives you a ton of really good benefits, so it might be worth it to possibly have that downside because the upside is so good. This is neutral cohesion. Negative cohesion is where the mechanics actively work against each other. For example, the barbarian's rage and anybody's spellcasting. You can't do both at the same time because rage says you cannot cast spells. So there is no point in becoming a barbarian wizard because you're going to have abilities that actively work against each other. Now, mechanics that use the same resource, such as spell slots or action economy, are technically negative mechanical cohesion because they're fighting for the same resource, but that's not always a bad thing. I mean, there's still options. Having extra attack and spellcasting is a very good thing to have, but you can't attack twice and cast a spell. No cohesion is just the mechanics don't interact at all. The barbarian's brutal critical increases the amount of damage you deal, and fast movement increases how fast you can go, and those two don't interact literally at all, so there is no cohesion. Now, mechanical cohesion can change depending on whether you get new abilities or have things that change previous ones. For example, the Bladesinger Wizard mitigates the downside of having extra attack and spellcasting by changing the rules for extra attack so that you can cast a cantrip as a part of your attack action. And the Eldritch Knight has Eldritch Strike to change how you play. Anytime you hit a creature with a weapon attack, they have disadvantage on saving throws against your spells. So extra attack allows you to hit multiple creatures. You hit, one creature and then you hit the next one, and then you back up next turn and drop a fireball. Or if you have the build, I don't know why you would do that, you could twin a spell, for example. But that's changing how you play so that the downsides of extra attack and spellcasting are mitigated. It loosens the strain on your resources because you want to do attack, spell every other turn. Philosophical cohesion, however, is more of a big picture sort of thing. It's not necessarily about the mechanics, it's about conveying ideas. How well do the mechanics, the abilities that you get, convey the ideas of the designer? Think of it as a painting. The mechanics are the colors that you use, and the philosophical cohesion is how well do those colors work together. If you want to create discord and chaos, you use clashing colors. But if you want to create a more mood-settling atmosphere, then you have colors that are very calm and blend together very well. But let's get back into D&D and talk about how the mechanics could tell a story of what the character wants, or what the designers want your characters to look like and to feel and act. Imagine 4 level 15 characters, all of them with 20 AC and an average of 35 damage per round. It's an estimate, it could be higher, could be lower. How might these characters use different philosophies to achieve the same statistics? Statistically, they're 20 AC, 35 average damage. So how do you get that 20 AC? Do you have heavy armor, or do you have high dexterity? What about magical spells or items? Granted, items aren't part of the character itself, but you get the picture. What about their damage? Do you have a single solid hit on a target, a nova, or do you use multiple attacks that could potentially hit multiple enemies? I'm going to throw a Punnett square up on screen and ask you to see if you can name which class I'm talking about. There's 2 heavily armored and 2 lightly armored. Heavy armor meaning medium or heavy armor, lightly armored is light or no armor. And then 2 classes that have nova damage and 2 classes that have sustain. Can you figure out which ones are what? Now, I'm going to give you a hint. Only 1 class needed any kind of outside source in order to reach that 20 AC, such as a magical item or a feat. There's no multi-classing, and all of these are martials. So pause the video and see if you can name them. Drop your guesses in the comments down below and see if you got it. For heavily armored and nova, did you guess the paladin? Their heavy armor and shield allows them to hit that 20 AC very easily. And their nova damage comes from them burning a spell slot to deal divine smites. Now, yes, they have extra attack, and yes, they can go way beyond that 35 points of damage, but I was roughly assuming, 1 smite per turn. This way, the paladin is very different from the heavily armored sustained damage of the fighter. They have extra attack, and a dual-wielding fighter with a second extra attack and a bonus action 2-weapon fighting, for example, can easily hit that 20 AC and 35 damage per round sustain. But their damage is across multiple attacks, which allows them to have more chances to hit, more chances to miss, but more opportunities to get a little bit of damage, whereas that paladin, if you nat 1, that's it. Now, the lightly armored nova damage is very, very clearly a rogue. Their sneak attack is that all-in-one hit and deal a ton of damage. You grab those, I think it's 8d6 at level 15, and you roll them, and you're dealing a single target fireball. And heaven help if you get a crit. Now, the rogue is the one that required a little bit of help if they have the bracers of defense and the dual wielder feat. For example, being able to bump their AC up by 1, and the item bumps it up by 2 with 20 dex and studded leather armor. Yeah, it's a little bit of help, but you get the picture. The last class, lightly armored and sustained damage, is the monk. Much like the fighter, they have the ability to deal 4 attacks in a single round. 2 from their extra attack, 2 from their bonus action flurry of blows. And then lightly armored, because of their unarmored defense feature, they can add their wisdom to their AC. So if you have a +5/+5 in dexterity and wisdom, you can easily reach that 20 AC. So now you can see how all of these things, whether you have a ton of armor or no armor, a ton of attacks or very few, you can see how that philosophy changes how you view each class and how they play. This is why philosophical cohesion is so important. Aside from just the mechanics, what the mechanics encourage you to do, how they encourage you to play, is a part of that philosophical cohesion. Imagine a party of 4, a barbarian, rogue, bard, and wizard, trying to get past a guard. The barbarian says, "I can knock him out." The rogue goes, whoa, hold on, I'll just sneak past and steal the keys. The bard says, "Oh, but I can help by distracting him." And the wizard says, "Well, would it be worth it to use invisibility?" Now, how do the mechanics of the classes lead you to believe that that's how they'll act? The barbarian's strengths are in strength and not so much in intelligence, so they solve problems through brute force. The rogue has many abilities that suggest sneakiness, being able to dash and disengage as a bonus action, evasion, and proficiency with thieves' tools, not something that is on the up and up, if you know what I mean. Bards are performers and use their charisma to solve problems and assist other players. Wizards' main feature is spellcasting, and they use it effectively to overcome obstacles. This is what the class abilities do. Now, in addition to all of that, the interaction of mechanics helps sell what the designer intended. Going back to the monk and rogue example from earlier, both of them can disengage or dash as a bonus action, leading them to be a striker class. They run in, they hit, and they get out. However, because the monk also has Flurry of Blows, which fights for its bonus action, it can also lend itself to being a frontline fighter, doubling its damage. Since the rogue's sneak attack also works with ranged weapons, it could also be a backline combatant, firing from a distance. This is how the mechanics of a class change how it plays. Both of them can be a striker, but they could also change their focus and be a completely different version. As a side note, the monk only gets ranged weapons as a monk weapon if you become a Kensei monk. So you literally can't, even though you have a high dexterity, you literally can't be a ranged monk unless you pick up a specific subclass. I mean, not to say you can't build one, but it will be quote-unquote suboptimal. But you get the picture. Now, how does all of this come into play for the channel? What does this mean for the Diablo adaptation? Well, a lot of what I'm doing is based off of Dungeons & Dragons and how they build their classes. And I want to bring that design philosophy into how I'm working on this channel. Many of the base classes of the Diablo adaptation are missing strong mechanical cohesion. The D&D classes have what I call an identifier or a mechanic that you think of, like the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of mechanics of that class. The rogue has sneak attack, the barbarian has rage, the fighter has extra attack, the druid has wild shape, those kinds of things. This isn't always the case. Wizards don't really have an identifier, except maybe their spellbook. But by and large, everything has something that you can point to and say, yes, that is a feature, like an identifying feature of that class. If you go to the 1.0 Diablo 2 class outline, and you go to the 2014 leveling, 2024 leveling, and D2 leveling, you can see at the bottom of each of those columns, I've written down something that I believe is the identifier for those classes. So this is something that I've been thinking about for quite some time. Now, the Diablo classes that I've built kind of have weak identifiers. Not having that strong identifier, I feel, makes the class disjointed by not having that ability that you can say, oh, that's what the class is about. Now, I've made a couple guesses at what I think they should be, but I feel that overall they're not terribly strong. The Amazon has critical strike. They are focused in on being aware of their surroundings and analyzing the battlefield. And so that critical strike kind of feels appropriate because you're able to identify a weak point and get a easier critical strike. Their mechanical cohesion, the abilities that work together, there's only two, dodge and avoid. Dodge allows you to add your wisdom when you dodge, and avoid allows you to dodge as a reaction. So this allows you to, instead of disengaging, just back up as a reaction when you're targeted by that opportunity attack, dodge as a reaction, and then dodge allows you to pump up your AC for a little bit. But by and large, there's almost nothing that works together. The Assassin's identifiers, I feel, are Finesse Mastery and Bursts of Speed. Kind of. I've actually made a couple of changes to Finesse Mastery to help solidify the identity of the class as a dual-wielding class. And Burst of Speed, even though it's kind of a meh ability in Diablo 2, I made it that kind of monk speed level up sort of thing. And that kind of pushes it to be an identifier. Now, the Assassin does have quite a few mechanical cohesion between a lot of their abilities. You have two-weapon fighting as a base part of D&D, but also extra attack and Finesse Mastery and Venom. All of them work together to deal additional damage. Burst of Speed and two-weapon fighting, though, are negatively cohesive because they both require your bonus action. You want to be that striker class, but you have no additional options, like the Monk's Stunning Strike, or an alternate playstyle like the Rogue's Sneak Attack. If you go in as a striker, your damage is going to be less, and you're not getting much, if any, benefit from just being, that dual-wielding class. You're getting no benefit for having the playstyle that the class encourages you to play. For the Barbarian, this one I also changed recently. As the time of this video, you'll see it in the next week when I do the changelog. But their identifier is very clearly their war cries. This is something that every build goes into, is that you want to bump up your hit points, bump up your defense, bump up your skills. And so the Barbarian's war cries, 3 of them, got moved from the singer into the main class. Now, as a side note, this does kind of make it weird because I'm pushing for like a wisdom class, but you also want charisma because they're war cries, because you're affecting your allies and your enemies. I'll have to work that out. Anyway, for mechanical cohesion, there's Find Potion, Find Item. Those work very well together. Find Item gives you advantage on the Find Potion survival check, so that works very, very nicely. And then, of course, Leap and Leap Attack work very well together because you're jumping around and smacking people on your way down from your jump. For the Druid, I'm actually very, very proud of this one. Wear Form and the Poison Vine are the identifiers, I feel, because that's kind of what the Druid does. And for the number of non-ability score increases, non-subclass abilities that it has, I think that there is a significant amount of interactions for its leveling journey. Both the Wear Form and your Poison Vine get better as you level up. So I think the Druid, double thumbs up, working pretty well for what it has. The Necromancer's identifiers are its curses and its golems, and I think that works pretty well. You're going to be using both of those in basically every Necromancer build, all 3 of them, and so I think it works pretty well. You know that is a Necromancer. Technically, the golems are negatively cohesive with each other because they take up your quote-unquote golem slot, but they're options, and you can modify it however you wish. And for the number of non-ability score increase, non-subclass abilities you get on your 1 to 20 journey, I think it's fine. Both the Druid and the Necromancer are full casters, and so they don't get as many abilities, which is one of the reasons why I cut down the number of curses you get from 5 to 2. Also, balance changes. So I think overall, Necromancer doing pretty well. The Paladin is pretty good. As a Paladin, it's auras. Of course it has auras. I don't know if Diablo invented the Paladin having auras or if it borrowed from D&D, but that's pretty solidified now as just what a Paladin does. It also picks up Blessings of the Light as this created ability that I made, but I think Blessings of the Light adds fairly well into that idea that you are a holy warrior, that you are calling on the heavens to help other people. As for its mechanical cohesion, extra attack and some auras like Might or Blessed Aim, those work very, very, very well together. The auras themselves are negatively cohesive since only one can be active at a time, but again, this is more of a balanced thing than a mechanical change. The Sorceress is strange. It doesn't really have an identifier that I would point to and say, yes, this is an elemental caster. But I would say warmth and frozen armor, ? Because warmth interfaces with its spellcasting and frozen armor gets an upgrade as you level up. So it kind of is. For the mechanical cohesion, spellcasting, of course, and warmth, but also energy shield, they work well together. Frozen armor and shiver armor as its upgrade, and Sorcerer's Insight and Masterful Insight as the created mechanic that I put in for the Sorceress to help fill it out a little bit. Those are all mechanically cohesive with those other abilities. And so I think those are pretty fine. So all in all, I think it's the Amazon with its lack of mechanical cohesion, the Assassin with burst of speed, two-weapon fighting, then the Barbarian with its lack of mechanical cohesion, giving it a barbarian feel, and then of course the Sorceress with its kind of weak-ish identifiers. Now that I think about that, that's actually not terrible. So by and large, that's where I'm sitting at right now with the mechanical cohesion. I feel that some of them are pretty weak. Some of them are doing really well, Druid and Paladin, for example. But let's take a look at the philosophical cohesion throughout the classes. The Amazon, I don't know. It doesn't really feel like an Amazon. When I think of an Amazon, I think of a strong warrior. I think of Xena Warrior Princess. I think of Wonder Woman. Somebody who's big and strong and can, hold their own on the front lines. And that just doesn't really fit with how I feel the Diablo Amazon is coming through. It feels like they are that the class is fighting by virtue of keeping people aware or being accurate on their hits and aware of their surroundings, but it's not like an Amazon. Now, this could be a weakness of Diablo 2, and you'll see that throughout the rest of them. Some of them are just because of where I'm adapting it from, but just the Amazon doesn't feel like an Amazon to me. For the Assassin, it's much the same. It doesn't really feel like an assassin, but that could be on the Diablo 2 version. It is very dex heavy, which is thematic. I mean, keep in mind, when you think of like modern day assassins. When we talk about assassins, they are John Wick or spy thrillers, things like that. The assassins tend to be very clever and very dexterous. You don't find the people who are, The Rock or Steve Austin or Jason Momoa as assassins. They tend to be the bruisers, the big henchmen, but not assassins. Now, the assassin does have the ability to not need keys in Diablo 2, hence their proficiency with thieves' tools, but I guess I could put an ability that just says you have advantage on picking locks, or you can create a set of thieves' tools in 10 minutes from scrap metal, or something like that. And that might help it feel more of maybe an assassin? I don't know. I'd like some feedback on this one. The Barbarian, this is the one that started the whole thing. I guess they feel like hardy wild men. Find potion, find item, they can leap and they can attack while leaping. They have natural armor or iron skin. They have natural resistance. They have war cries, but they don't feel like a barbarian. If somebody handed me the class and asked me to guess what they were, I'd say probably a ranger. That they feel like they're out in nature rather than big, strong, hulking people. So the philosophy just doesn't really come through. And I guess you could say that's bleed over from what D&D has done, that I'm comparing D&D to Diablo and just finding Diablo to be wanting. Because a lot of their abilities, a lot of their their mechanics come from their subclass, right? In Diablo, like most of your damage dealing comes from your combat masteries. You have bash and concentrate and whatnot, but all of those are wrapped up in a single subclass, other than the throw barbarian. So maybe I should move some of those abilities out, but then the subclass becomes lacking in its abilities. I don't know. It's something I'll have to think about. Now, the druid feels like a druid. It can shapeshift. It has an animal companion. It is a druid. I have zero questions about its philosophical cohesion here. It feels like it's supposed to. The necromancer kind of falls into that Diablo 2, quote-unquote, Diablo 2 trap, that it doesn't really feel like a necromancer. At least this build, this version doesn't feel like a necromancer. It doesn't feel like someone who manipulates the dead. But granted, your subclass does help push into that a little bit with your bone and your summoner. Poison, I guess, kind of works because you're working with poisons of the body, kind of. The paladin, like the druid, feels paladin-y. There's no comments necessary here. It feels like a paladin. It looks like a paladin. It acts like a paladin. It's a paladin. The sorceress feels like a sorceress. Kind of. If you don't know the Diablo lore, you don't know who the sorceresses were, then it kind of feels off. It doesn't really come across as that elemental caster until very, very high levels where you get your elemental mastery. Because warmth just feels, it doesn't say fire, and teleport doesn't scream lightning. But for what it does, the adaptation does a pretty good job of getting that Diablo feel. So I think I'd like some insight into how I might be able to change the sorceress to feel more like that elemental caster without its subclasses, I guess. But anyway, that's where I am right now. All of this is just kind of this venting, I want to say. Just kind of, I had a bunch of thoughts bouncing around in my head, and I wanted to get them down and help people see into how I'm looking at what I'm doing. I want to be a game designer, and so this is kind of helping other people learn a little bit about game design and how things could change one way or the other depending on how the mechanics need to go and how the philosophy of building this massive thing, this massive game options could go. There's a lot of balance that I have to work with. Not just game balance, but do I go more Diablo? Do I go more D&D? How do I fit all of these things together? And there is so much that is lost anytime you make a transition between game or between any kind of medium. I mean, this is a law of physics that anytime you change mediums, you're going to lose energy. You're going to lose something. If you have a book that gets adapted to a film, that gets adapted to a video game, that gets adapted to a play, that gets adapted to a video game, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, then you're going to end up losing something every time it transitions from one medium to the next. And that's one of the reasons why the assassin is having so much problem, because even though bursts of speed is a kind of meh ability, I've made it a central part of this, a central part of its identity, because it is something that is low danger of becoming incredibly dangerous, and it does feel very much like what the assassin wants to do. Anyway, I think I'm going to end it there. I'd love to talk more and more about this, and there's going to be things I'm going to come up with that I wish I should have said or could have said, but I've dumped enough time into this, and I have to get ready for work because it's 4:11 in the morning. and I work at 6. Anyway, you can contact me at XenosFan2, that is XENOZFAN2 on Blue Sky and Reddit. And you can contact the channel directly at Diablo TODND on Blue Sky and YouTube. Thank you much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Have a good whatever.